Hey guys, what's happening? So with more talk about the Hunt for Wolverine, let's get into the conclusion of Adamantium Agenda. And with this ending, it's the conclusion of one story that weaves in with many others to paint the picture of the entire event. And that's one of the things that's really grabbed me about this series, because it's not like your conventional methods where you have one story and then a whole bunch of tie-ins. But instead, the event is a composition of tie-ins, starting with a one-shot, then ending with a one-shot as well, which I like. So now the last thing we talked about in Adamantium Agenda was the gathering of Iron Man, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Spider-Man searching to find the missing body of Wolverine, which they discovered was missing when Kitty Pryde came to Tony Stark for help. And one of the most important things about these four within this series is that one specific event brought them closer to Wolverine on a personal level than ever before, and doing so by detonating a bomb that was designed to only be averted by manual ignition. And they tried to evacuate everyone, but there simply just wasn't enough time to get everyone out of blast radius before a detonation. But with Wolverine doing this, making this sacrifice, it showed them a whole nother level of his character as a human being. But this brought them closer to him, like for Spider-Man, who I would argue to say is more durable than Wolverine, but on the flip side, his healing factor pales in comparison. And for that reason, when they discovered that the device had to be manually detonated and quickly so it would only destroy the area that has been evacuated, Wolverine chose himself over him because he was more likely to recover than Spider-Man, which compelled Peter to promise Logan that he would come back, find every piece that's left, and try to put him back together. And as far as Luke and Jessica, and Luke being the most durable of the four, and I'm talking about only to the level of skin breaking, because I can already see the arguments in the comments like Wolverine is adamantium bones that are virtually unbreakable, and that argument can go all day. But I'm talking about by definition of durability, which is the ability to withstand wear, pressure, or damage in any situation, and only because your epidermis is your first line of defense. But in any situation in comparison to these two, Wolverine would just draw blood first. But if you were to ask the question who would walk out alive, then of course that would go to Wolverine, because in most instances, even if showing damage first, he would just continue to regenerate at a phenomenal rate, versus many others who are harder to break, but once they're broken, it's over. And that's mainly because all healing factors are not created equal. But with that being said, and Luke Cage being less likely to be blown into pieces, Logan still refused to allow him or Jessica to make the sacrifice. And for the record, Jessica was really just last on the list. But Logan refused to let either one of them even make that choice because they have a child. And in this case, Logan didn't want Luke to be killed and leave his daughter without a father. And that's the main thing that compelled Luke and Jessica to help Tony on this search. And on a personal level, they were like, hey, okay, if Logan needs anything and we're able to fight for him, we'll do it. And it's really those ties in conjunction with Tony Stark's promise to Logan after Logan survived that explosion that caused Tony to promise Logan, in the event that you do die, that Tony would not allow his body to get into the hands of anyone who would either weaponize or use it for some scientific experiment. And so this one incident and all of these reasons that tied everyone closer to Logan, this bond is really the heart of Adamantium Agenda. And when Kitty Pryde asked for Tony's help, one of the first things that he used was his connection to spies that he already had in place to make sure that his technology wasn't being sold on the black market, which that alone is something very critical to the conclusion of this run, because that intel, that information led Tony and the others to a secret auction offshore in a submarine, where word on the street was at their next auction that they would have the DNA of Wolverine. And for that reason, they had to go in disguise and they had to be there, because this could potentially tell them who has his body as well. And because at this auction, everyone there had a mask on to protect their identities, mainly so no one would know who was buying what. But when it was confirmed that they had the DNA of Wolverine, Mr. Sinister popped up out of nowhere saying, hey, that was stolen from me. And really from there, everything went off the rails. Laura Kinney also revealed that she was there because she was also on her own mission trying to find Logan. And much of that really reaches back to the Wolverine series, Wolverines with an S, because that's like one of your biggest precursors to the Hunt for Wolverine as an entire event. But like I said, this entire encounter with Mr. Sinister caused everything to go off the rails, blew a hole in the submarine, which Sinister also used as an opportunity to escape. But for the heroes that are here, it worked into their favor for two reasons. And the first reason being that they have a huge submarine full of villains that they can just hand over to S.H.I.E.L.D. because this attack from Sinister really left them stuck. But on top of that, a number of these villains from the auction who have been taken into custody by S.H.I.E.L.D., they had either worked with Sinister at one point in the past or they're currently working for him now. and this gave Tony and the others additional information to further their investigation by heading to Mr. Sinister's base of operations, which you could imagine with all the experiments that Sinister's been known for doing, this place would be equipped with ridiculous countermeasures, and they could have easily just waited for S.H.I.E.L.D. or called all the other Avengers and just went in like gangbusters, but that would have taken time, and that's something that they do not have at this point, because there's no telling how long this intel is good for. Because even with the small portion of Sinister's research and staff being compromised, who's to say he won't just download all of his research and move to another location like he's done before? And so as a result, while they're on this helicarrier, Tony tells them we have to go there now, we gotta move in a small number so we can get under the radar. And he does this by giving everyone here their own Iron Man suit. Man, that was quick. And it's very likely that going into this that Tony had suits for the other three, just sitting aside just in case. And depending on what you're going upon, whether it's the comics or the films, an extra suit can be modified and built within a matter of hours, under the pretense that it's a modification from a base mark that has been given slight alterations for that specific hero. And the delivery of that suit is substantially faster, whether it's a matter of minutes or whatever, depending on wherever Tony or said person is actually at. But with these suits, they're able to fly under the radar and get to the base undetected. But when they get to the actual base, the lack of security is kind of unsettling, and they're able to get through the few guards they encounter fairly easy. And when they get to the main corridor, initially they find DNA samples from a number of the heroes. But as they continue their search, they find out it goes a lot deeper than that, because at this base, Sinister has possibly collected the DNA of every person on the planet. We're talking about billions of samples. And even from the large collection that they find here, like this is only the humans, meaning that there has to be another location where they would find the mutants. And Peter's the one who did a scan who figured out what they found wasn't it, and that there was another section, meaning that Sinister pretty much separated the regular humans from those who had gained powers who were humans prior to, and then beyond that he had another section where those who were born with powers, most of which being classified as mutants. But once again, there's that lingering question of why is the security here so minimal once they've gotten inside? And Laura Kinney sniffs out that the answer is behind this door, and once they go through that door, they're given their answer fairly quickly. But before I talk about that, I want to go back to the helicarrier for just a second and really just flesh out a little bit more about the way that Sinister works. Because as I talked about before, with the number of his employees being at the submarine, at the auction, back on the helicarrier, we found out that the auctioneer himself, he is also an employee of Sinister on this island, and he had mentioned that none of Sinister's employees know everything. They're broken up into sections, they work on that section, and that's all the information that they're given. And Jessica, she's the one who pushed him to the point of telling everything he knows. And that's mainly because on the helicarrier, she told him that she could accidentally trip and punch a hole in his chest. And I have to say myself, that is a very compelling piece of information. But when they open that last door, which is the place where the mutant information is supposed to be, they walk into like a slaughterhouse. And every scientist from this department has been taken out without mercy. And the reason why is because this was a heist job. Someone came here, got into this department, and copied Sinister's information from this department. But even still, as wrecked as this place is, all the information is still intact. And when Tony discovers this and he begins to decrypt it, everybody's like, wait, why? Because all of this data, as far as everyone else is concerned, can have no means to a positive end. And over the years, the methods of obtaining it weren't pleasant for that subject, to say the least. And of recent years, I'm sure he's been able to get the majority of it from stealing it from other sources, possibly hospitals or clinics, because there's no way he could have got multiple billions of samples one by one, even if he was collecting them like one a day, every day of his life. Because Sinister is roughly 200 years old, and there's only a little over 36,000 days in a century, so it's obvious upon the discovery of this facility that he has taken advantage of modern day resources. But what's compelling about the dilemma that Tony has in this situation is that on one hand, it was easy to tell Logan, hey, when you die, I'll make sure nobody gets your body and no science or research will be done as a product thereof. But it's another thing when Tony, as this man of science, sees this bottomless ocean of information. It's almost like decrypting it and downloading it was a reflex, because making a promise of doing what obviously sounds right and then actually fulfilling that promise, the level of difficulty between those two is staggering. But before Tony can even respond, Sinister pops up and he is pissed, and he comes in looking like Jason Momoa. Oh man, like he has got some serious gains from the last couple hours, or however long it's been since the fight at the auction. But when he shows up here to defend what's left of his research, at least at this location in the Indian Ocean, there's not much fight left in him because whoever came prior to has already worn him out. They sent in a kill team, took what they needed and dipped out, leaving Sinister weakened and giving the heroes this rare opportunity. Because everyone besides Tony is like, okay, this is the point where we destroy all the data, which is very unlikely to be used for anything good, but most importantly, all of us keeping our promise to Wolverine, which, like I said, this is the heart of Adamantium agenda. But at this moment, Tony hesitates while he is face to face with Mr. Sinister. And I gotta be honest, like at this moment, I feel like he's like looking at Mr. Sinister and like, hey, don't tell nobody else this, but I'm impressed. Like I heard about all this before, but seeing it now, man. And of course he didn't do this, but you could just imagine what's going through his mind at this moment, because he did pause. And in this data, or among this data, you also have the DNA of Wolverine. And Tony remembers at this moment something very specific about that conversation with Wolverine, in addition to just making that promise to him after Logan survived that explosion. Because during that conversation, Logan told Tony that Logan saw something just seconds before the explosion, just seconds before his eyes were blown out of his head. And by the way, Peter did find Logan's eyes back at the explosion and it totally grossed him out. But what Logan saw at that last second was the inner components of that machine. They had clearly been designed by Stark Industries, meaning that this bomb, it was designed by Tony Stark. And Tony doesn't deny it, because this goes back to the beginning of Adamantium agenda, because Tony knows that people are stealing his research and selling it. And not just that, but taking his tech left and right. And that's why he set out these moles to figure out where it's at, or find as many of these people that are doing this. Because it's that intel that led him to the auction where he discovered Sinister's main base. And had he not had this information, him and the other Avengers would have been just scratching their heads somewhere. And that is a huge conflict for Tony, because also in Punisher War Machine, which we will talk about very soon. Some of you guys been asking me to do videos on that for weeks and weeks and weeks now, and I've been alluding to it slightly on the Cosmic Ghost Rider playlist, but we will definitely go there. But with Punisher and others, which we'll talk about when we get to that series, which we'll get to very soon, because Frank Castle, man, no wonder there's two of them now. But this is a larger issue that Iron Man has been dealing with for some time, and when he told Logan, Logan was like, hey, I believe you, but he told him, Tony, do better. And it was that part of the conversation that really stuck with Tony. And jumping forward into the conclusion of Adamantium agenda is the reason why he decided to destroy all of the research. And the way that this comes around full circle, it is beautiful. Because think about it, that bomb that Tony designed, you couldn't stop it. And that bomb was just an idea that floated through his head. He did a little development and he just threw it to the side. And like, you can just imagine what other ideas he's come up with that are in the hands of God knows who. But take it a step further. Imagine Tony had taken Sinister's research and just played with a few ideas and just tossed them to the side. Just imagine if those projects were to get into the hands of someone who would actually see them through. The devastation that could come as a product of that. Or even worse, Tony Stark could eventually turn into another Mr. Sinister, minus the apocalypse part. But Tony already has the goatee, so hey, shows you there. They're already thinking alike to some level. But you know what, come to think of it, Tony did connect to that machine, so if he did download a portion of it, and later on in Marvel Legacy, Iron Man becomes Mr. Sinister, I wouldn't be totally shocked. I mean, Punisher's become Ghost Rider and Cosmic Ghost Rider, then you got Punisher who's become War Machine at the same damn time in Marvel Legacy. Sometime back, Doom even became Iron Man, Silver Surfer's become Thor, Loki's become Doctor Strange, and the list goes on. Everybody's becoming other becomings. And Iron Man has even become Doctor Strange before, so it's not far of a reach to say that his character could turn into someone else. But either way, we do know that he did get to see some of the information, because later on, after they get back and they go to Jessica and Luke's house, in a way he kind of tells on himself, because he informs Laura Kinney that he discovered that she is not a clone of Wolverine. And for her, this is pretty significant because it raises quite a few questions to what we think we know of Laura's history, but it also confirms some issues that she's had before as well. And it's almost like Tony gets a kick out of this information, like that grin on his face, like knowledge. But this reveal is pretty big for Laura, because in a way she is still a clone of Wolverine. But what Sinister discovered as a result of his research is that the product of Laura Kinney is more than a clone, because Laura Kinney is just as much Sarah as she is Logan, and it's confirmed that Laura is complete like any other person or any other child of Logan. like just as if Sarah and Logan had conceived the child on their own. And for anyone who hasn't been reading X-23 or Wolverine during the time that Laura Kinney was Wolverine, because at this point her series has gone back to the X-23 title. But for a long time, this debate has been something that's weighed heavily on Laura Kinney. And we saw it in Orphans of X, where she believed that she'd been reunited with her mother. We talked about it briefly in Circle of Four, which was a while back. Didn't really finish that story because a lot of you didn't seem interested in it. And I'm only saying that because it didn't get a lot of views at the time, so I figured you guys just wanted to move on. And I'm pretty sure either way, I'll just go back to that just to do it. But one of the things that we saw her struggling with even back then, where she had to go to hell with Venom, Red Hulk, Ghost Rider, and they were attacked by their greatest struggles, this was hers. And even though she did get confirmation back then that she had a soul, and Wolverine at the time pretty much being like, duh. But fast forward to now, because of Mr. Sinister having all this data and coming to this conclusion, she now has this answer from a scientific standpoint, surprising her with another level of assurance. And I'm pretty sure Sinister's somewhere like, thanks to me, and y'all said I wasn't helping people. But what's crazy is that this good news does not help the argument of stopping Mr. Sinister, because he is nefarious at his core. But I do also believe that there's a chance that this could spill over into Tony Stark salvaging much of that research. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. There is much more to talk about in The Hunt for Wolverine as we approach the finale one-shot, The Hunt for Wolverine Dead Ends. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you can catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. But that's it for this one, guys, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.